Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be chatting all about Visible, so the band and the app, and just kind of giving you my thoughts and my honest and genuine review. This isn't an ad, I'm not working with Visible in any way, this is 100% an honest review. I'm just editing this video and wanted to add in that I have been using the Visible band for just over a year now, so I feel in a really good place to be able to give a really honest review, having been trying it for a year and had good days and bad days within that. If you are already familiar with Visible, you kind of know what it is and a bit about how it works, then feel free to skip to this time here to just jump straight into the review section of the video. But for anybody who doesn't know what Visible is, if you're not really familiar with it, Visible is a kind of two-part product. So you have the actual band itself, which is a kind of continuous heart rate monitor, which you can wear either on your upper arm or on your wrist, depending on your preference. And then it is also the app. So the band connects via Bluetooth to the app to record all of your heart rate data. It is a product that has very much taken the ME and chronic illness community by storm over the past few years, and is sort of viewed as this very revolutionary product for people with ME and other energy limiting chronic illnesses like long COVID and things like that. The best way that I can describe it, or the way that I tend to kind of describe it, is that it's like the anti-fitness tracker. So obviously very common things are things like the Apple Watch and the Whoop band and the Oura Ring, and all of those work. I think I don't really have any experience with them, but as far as I can see, they track your heart rate, monitor your heart rate, and when you go into a zone of heart rate that would suggest exertion or exercise, you will be notified of that as kind of a well done, you're doing exercise, and an encouragement and praising you for doing exercise. And I think that you can kind of set fitness goals and track your steps and things like that. So Visible works in a similar way in that it tracks your heart rate, but when Visible detects that your heart rate is going into that higher zone of exertion, it will notify you as more of a warning that you are exerting a lot of energy, and now would be a good time, if you're able to stop and rest. And rather than having kind of fitness goals or tracking your steps or things like that, you will track pace points. So you will have a pace point budget, which is 100% individual to each person. So when you first get your band for those first 4 days, you don't have a budget. The band and the app will just collect all of your heart rate data, turn that into pace points, and just see how many pace points you use each day. And then at the end of those 4 days, it will basically take the average, and that will become your pace point budget. But you can edit that, which is something that I'm going to talk more about in just a minute. A question that I think is very common is, what on earth are pace points? So the best way that I can describe pace points, and the way that they're typically described, is, I'm sure a lot of people will have heard of the spoon theory. And pace points are essentially a kind of more tangible and more visible version of spoons. So it's kind of a way of just measuring energy exertion, just a way of showing how much energy you have used and how much energy different activities take. I don't 100% know or really fully understand how the pace points are calculated, or kind of the exact science behind how that works. But what I do know is that Visible tracks your heart rate in 3 zones, so rest, activity and exertion. So any time that you spend with your heart rate in the rest zone uses 0 pace points. Any time in the activity zone will use some pace points, obviously depending on how long you are in that zone for. And then I believe that they say that any time spent in the exertion zone uses about 3 or 4 times more pace points than the activity zone. I could be wrong on that, so don't quote me on that, but I think that's how it works. So you can go into the app and you can see how many pace points you've used and at what time you were in different zones, so you can then kind of tag activities so you can get a really clear idea of how much energy different activities are using. There's also morning and evening check-ins. So the evening check-in is basically a symptom check-in. So when you first get Visible, you can put in the different symptoms that you generally experience on a day-to-day basis, and then at the end of each day you can rate each of those symptoms depending on how you experience that on that particular day. You can also track within that evening check-in whether you're in a crash, what type of exertion you have done that day, and you can also put in anything else that might be affecting your energy levels on that particular day. So things like whether you're on your period, and there's also just a note space where you can just put in any other details that you would want to be able to look back on to see why maybe your symptoms were more or less severe on that particular day. And then the morning check-in is done in kind of two parts. You start by rating your sleep as either good, fair, bad or awful, and you will then do a 1 minute heart rate reading, which can either be done through the band or by just putting your finger on the back facing camera. And that 1 minute reading takes both your heart rate and also your heart rate variability. And Visible will then use that information about your heart rate variability, your sleep, and also your symptom severity from the previous evening to give you a score for the day of how stable your body is, ranging from 1, which is completely out of balance, up to 5, which is completely stable and improving. So that in the morning just gives you an idea of how your body is doing internally, physically, to then hopefully kind of give you a better idea of how to plan your day. So yeah, those are kind of the key features, the key things that Visible offers. I'll now hand over to me on a different day to review and share with you my personal thoughts and opinions on this product. I thought I'm going to start with the positives, start with my pros. The first one is validation. I think this is a common theme that comes up a lot when people talk about Visible, is actually having this visible thing that you can see that is reiterating what you know you feel is really, really validating. Being able to see that things like showering use up sometimes all my pace points for the day and other things like that is really, really validating and really just helpful mentally to actually have, even though as someone with ME, I know that it's not in my head, I know that it's 100% real, but actually being able to see that kind of on paper, as it were, is just really helpful. Another pro for me is that it helps me to be more in tune with my body and knowing when would be a good time to stop before I get to that point where I'm completely crashed, which is really useful and kind of one of the key points, I guess, of Visible. It also helps to give other people a better understanding. I am so lucky that I have an amazing support network around me who have always been really supportive and understanding, but obviously they aren't inside my body, they aren't experiencing it, so they can't fully understand or comprehend what I'm feeling. But having Visible has been really useful in being able to show people so that they can actually see for themselves that things take a lot of energy and things like that. Also, I've always been really bad. I'm a bit of like a people pleaser. I've always really struggled with, like, if I'm with a friend saying that I'm too tired and that I need to rest now and that I need them to leave, because it just feels really awkward for me. Having Visible and being able to kind of say, I'm in my exertion, I need to rest, or I've used this many pace points, so is it okay if we leave it there for today, kind of thing, I've found really useful. And also now that a lot of my friends are aware that I use Visible and how it works, they can kind of say, how many pace points have you used? It's just useful basically to give them a better understanding and to kind of make that conversation more open and more accessible. Another thing which I love about Visible is how individual it is. So like I said, your PacePoint budget is 100% individual. It's based on your own data from those first 4 days, but also you can edit that if you don't feel that it's accurate for you. So it might be that those first 4 days you were either less active than you normally are, or you were more active than you normally are, or if after a few months you find that you're always well below or always way above your pace points, you can then adjust that to find something that works for you and makes sense for you. You can also edit the heart rate zones. So like I said, there's the 3 heart rate zones of rest, activity and exertion, and Visible comes kind of preset with their kind of recommended thresholds for each of those zones. But you can edit those zones so they make more sense for you, which is great. And also you can edit how often you want to receive notifications of exertions, so you can choose how you want Visible to work for you. It's just really useful because it's good that they recognise that ME and similar chronic illnesses are different for every single person. It's not a one-size-fits-all illness, so it can't be a one-size-fits-all product. So I like that they've recognised that. And then my final pro is that the team that work at Visible are really helpful. I've had a few issues with my band at various points, and it's really easy in the app to message with a team member and they respond super quickly and they are just really, really helpful. So that is a massive pro. Those are my positives. Those are the things that I really love about the Visible band. So now moving on to the cons, the things that aren't so great. The first one, I don't think this is a problem that everyone experiences, but it is something that I've experienced, and that is that the heart rate readings aren't always accurate. I've had quite a few times when Visible is registering that my heart rate is really low, but then when I've checked my heart rate using a pulse oximeter, it shows that actually my heart rate is sometimes about double what Visible thinks that it is, or at least quite considerably higher than what Visible thinks it is. So that is obviously an issue because it means that it's not measuring accurately and therefore my pace points aren't accurate. And like I said, I don't think that it's something that everyone experiences, but that is just an issue that I myself have had, which obviously makes the band on some days just not really worth using because it isn't doing what it's supposed to do. Also, not all exertions of energy cause a raised heart rate, so things like reading or any other kind of cognitive activity isn't increasing the heart rate but is still very, very tiring. So that's again where Visible can be quite inaccurate, is that the heart rate is registering as being in the resting zone and therefore isn't using pace points, but actually it is still using an awful lot of energy. Visible only really focuses on the physical exertion rather than cognitive and emotional and anything that isn't raising your heart rate. Obviously because of that, the pace points aren't always 100% accurate, and this kind of leads me on to my next point, is that while yes, it can be very validating, it can also sometimes cause me to second guess how I feel, which is the complete opposite of what I want and what I need from this product, because like I said, I've had issues with the heart rate being inaccurate, and also just with the fact that it focuses on physical exertion. I can get to the end of a day and be absolutely exhausted and feel that I've gone way over what my pace point budget should be, but actually Visible is showing that I'm still well within that budget, and that can cause me to then kind of, second guess myself, and where it kind of does the opposite of validating and it very much invalidates how I feel. That's kind of like my biggest con, I guess, with this product. Also, I wish that Visible had a better sleep tracking feature. I believe that's something that they are maybe looking at rolling out, but at the moment I have recently started wearing the band overnight, so I can see what my heart rate is like overnight, but it doesn't give me information or give me any feedback on how well I slept. And that's obviously something that a lot of other kind of fitness wearable and tracker things have, is a really accurate sleep tracker, so that's somewhere which I feel like Visible could definitely improve. Also, with the morning stability score, it is based on your recent average of your heart rate and your heart rate variability. So actually, if you're in a crash and your body is registering as being unstable, but then you stay in that crash for a considerable length of time, your morning stability may start to suggest that you are stable and that maybe you can do a little bit more or that you're doing really well, when actually that isn't the case. It's that you're essentially stable in that crash, stable in instability. So that's not overly helpful. And then also a big con is the price. It is an expensive thing. The band itself costs around £65, and then in addition to that you have to get the subscription to be able to use the app with it, and that costs either £14.99 a month or £131.88 a year, which works out at £10.99 a month. And living with disability is more expensive, that's just a fact. So it is then an additional expense that you have to, it's not just a one-off purchase, it's a continuous subscription that you have to pay. So that is, yeah, a con that I think a lot of people talk about, which is why it is so difficult to make the decision of whether or not to buy it. So yeah, those are the less positive things with Visible. I feel very much on the fence still after using it for a year. Some days it's amazing and it works really well and I'm so pleased I have it. Other days it doesn't work as well and it feels disappointing. I asked on Instagram for people to send in any questions that they had, so I have those here, so I'm just going to go through those now. So the first one is, how useful is it? I feel like I kind of answered that already in the review, and it is a difficult question to answer because sometimes it's very, very useful, sometimes it's not very useful. I think it's useful to use in conjunction with any other things that you are already doing to either pace or just simply with knowing in yourself how you feel. I personally don't think that this would be useful for somebody who's only just been diagnosed. I think that you need to already have a really good understanding of your body with ME or whatever chronic illness you have. You need to already have that understanding and be able to know and trust in how you feel. I think Visible used exclusively as a tool for pacing and for understanding your body, it isn't going to be very useful. Somebody else asks, what is your charging routine? So the band needs charging roughly every 5 days or so. Sometimes I have to charge it more regularly than that. My routine used to be that I would just charge it overnight if I saw that before going to bed it's around 20%. It only actually takes about an hour to charge though. But since I started wearing the band to sleep, I wouldn't really say that I have a charging routine. I basically just keep an eye on the charge and I aim to charge it while I am either resting or doing something that I know is going to at least be registering as resting, even if it's not actually resting, so that I know that I'm not affecting the overall data too much. So I try to, charge it at a time where I know that it's unlikely that I will be experiencing any sort of heart rate spike. If you can call that a routine, that's my charging routine. Another question is, how does it help you manage your ME? So obviously it is really helpful, generally speaking, for that kind of pace point, knowing how much energy you've used, and when it works well, it does help me manage my ME because I can see on it, if on a day I know that I've gone over my pace point budget, then I know that on the next day I need to try and stay below and I need to have a quieter day. It helped me to become more in tune with my body and helped me to kind of recognise when to stop before it got to the point where I was completely exhausted and had no other choice but to stop. Another question is, what made you get it? So it was kind of all over social media, everywhere, and I saw it and I thought, oh wow, that's incredible, and then I saw the price and thought, maybe not. But they do have a free version of the app which just does the morning stability score and the evening check-in. So I actually used the free version for about a year before I got the band itself, so I kind of had some experience with how Visible works at its most basic point. And then I just kind of had a couple of times where I did stuff that put me into a crash that I then looked back on and thought, in hindsight, if I'd stopped what I was doing before I got to that point, I could have prevented this crash. And that's when I decided to actually get Visible to help me to recognise when I was heading for a crash before I actually got to the crash, which is something which it has helped me to do. Another question is, do you find it helpful when you're not that active? So this is something which I've kind of already spoken about, which is that it's not the most helpful thing for those cognitive energy exertions like reading or watching something, but it is helpful for even kind of the small physical activities of showering, of brushing my teeth, of getting dressed, things like that are kind of considered to be very simple, mundane, everyday tasks. They do use a lot of energy for me, so I do find it helpful for those things. So even though I'm generally speaking not active, it is still useful for those things that for me are big activities. And then the final question is it worth it? This feels like a good question to finish on, and it's a difficult question to answer. I can't answer this question for anybody else. For one person it might be 100% worth it, for somebody else it isn't at all, and that depends on so many factors including your financial situation. But for me, I think that the band is worth the price. I don't think that the subscription is worth the price personally. I think to be paying that much on a regular basis, I think that the heart rate readings should be more accurate. I think that it should find a way to take into consideration other types of energy. Obviously it can't track your heart rate for things that aren't increasing your heart rate, but I do feel like there should be some sort of way that you can input information of doing a cognitive activity. Yeah, I feel like there could be more to justify the price. It is useful, it is a really useful bit of kit. I have found it to be very validating. It has helped me understand my body better than I did before, and helped other people to understand as well. That's just my personal thoughts and opinions, but I don't regret getting the product. I do generally find it useful. If you have Visible, if you use the Visible band, then please comment down below how you found it, if you agree with what I've said, if you disagree with what I said. Please do put that down in the comments, because then hopefully other people who are thinking about getting the band can see my review but also other people's and gain a better understanding. If you have any other questions, then again, pop them down in the comments and I will do my best to answer those. If you did enjoy this video, please do give it a thumbs up, and also please do subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. It is free and it really does mean a lot to me. And yes, I will see you all again next month with another video. Bye!